So I will call the meeting to order at 5:34.
I'll take minutes, by the way.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Hello again, everybody. Officially on the recording. Did everyone get a chance to see the agenda, and are there any adjustments that someone would like to make? All right.
Yes and no.
Sounds good. First item on the agenda is to read our communication agreement and mission statement. Does anybody have that up that would like to read it?
I can read it.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Okay. The mission statement: to connect people to the place in ways that allow recreation, exploration, collaboration, and stewardship of the cow pasture. We affirm pursuing stewardship of the cow pasture has many dimensions, including a positive group process. Thus, we adopt the following agreement for all forms of communication: verbal, written, email, etc. 1, we value what each person has to offer. Please come prepared to participate fully. 2, all relevant ideas are welcome. Pursuit of ideas will be based on feasibility and support of the group. Only present ideas that you are willing to carry forward personally. 3, consensus agreement will be sought. Only block consensus when you cannot live with a decision going forward. And the footnote to that is, well, consensus decisions making is important to this committee. It is recognized some decisions are time sensitive and do not lend themselves to consensus decision making. Therefore, permission is granted to the local leader to make decisions that clearly align with the group's mission statement and management plan. When possible, consulting with other active members is advised. 4, seek first to understand and then respond with kindness and respect. 5, observe the 3 C's. Keep contributions concise, constructive, and connected to the group's purpose. Share the floor and be open to responses, even if you disagree.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Next would be approval of the minutes from our November 16th meeting. Does anybody have any adjustments that they would like to make to those? All right, hearing none, we can accept those as is. And an update on the Snowbees and the Vast Trail. And Mark, I'm glad you're here because Chris, you had messaged me to some point to reach out, and I hadn't gotten a chance to do that. But yeah, Mark.
Yeah.
Do you know what's going on?
Yeah. So the trails are technically open, although they're in a what they call a yellow status, which is, early season riding, proceed with caution kind of a status. I noticed that the groomer has been down through once.
Okay.
It has not been through since the last storm. What Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, whatever day it snowed. They haven't been down through there again. So I'm assuming once they go through again, the snow bridge should be in place and we should be good to go. The signs have been put up, including the sensitive area 15-mile-an-hour ones that we had made. I did check on those. Those are both up, one at each entrance. What else? They have not been doing any debrushing or any clearing unless there was, a down tree or something. But there was no planned debrushing. I think that was it. Oh, I did go to city council. We did get the permission slip signed, and that's all taken care of.
Great. This must have been pretty recent, no?
We went to the city council like the Tuesday after you contacted. I was able to get on the agenda and went to the meeting, and they got approved. Then I went back like the next day to pick up the signed form.
Yeah, I was thinking more more of like the grooming and everything. I think Susan and I were up there last week to talk about one of the other topics we have. And it didn't appear to have been groomed, but there wasn't as much snow then either. So
Yeah. No, big one since we had that, 12, 14 inches of snow there.
well, that's good. I know there's a lot of downed trees still in the Barre Town Forest on the Vast Trail, so I wasn't sure if maybe there were other priorities that needed to be taken care of or something. But well, thank you. That's good.
Yeah. So there are some trails that belong to a different club.
Mm-hmm.
The Berrytown Thunder Chickens have the basically the other side of 302.
Mm-hmm.
We have side and they have the other side. So I think the forest you're referring to might be up East Barre there, the Mill Sports or Mill Trail Network there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That would be,
Millstone Trails.
yeah, that would be the other club.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments?
I was actually up for a walk today, and yeah, the other thing, Mark, that you didn't mention is that the gate that was open and the fence is secured with a bungee cord now, so that's good. I was really afraid that we're going to get snow and the groomer would come through and get stuck there without being able to open the gate or not being able to back up. So that's why I kind of started getting anxious and reached out to Tim to follow up with you on that. But yeah, that looks good and signs are up. And I did notice that someone came up, I forget his name, down on Quinlan Drive. It looked like fresh tracks came up from Quinlan Drive. It looked like today, and actually it's later this afternoon. I think I could actually smell like the exhaust. I think he has one of the older snowmobiles. So I think someone just recently went from Quinlan up. And so, yeah, and he must have cut a tree too, because I didn't think he was going to get through. There was a pretty good sized tree down over that trail. It was a good 6 inches in diameter that he must have cut. Someone must have cut. But Steve McKenzie also got to give him credit for he cut a huge clump of birch that came down in one of the storms that was right across the the sledding hill. So he removed that, and someone else cut another on the Vast Trail, cut a branch. I thought it might have been Steve McKenzie, but he said it was not him. So so someone did that as well. I think the groomer would have run into that and not been able to get through.
Nice. Well, hopefully the snow sticks around a little bit so everyone can enjoy it.
I've only been out once so far, so.
Next on the agenda was the creation of subcommittees, specifically for conservation and invasive species. I know I have an update on part of that, but Chris, do you want to start with that first?
Actually, it was just something that I floated out and spoke to members about. You know, there's been all of these initiatives that just are in the back of my head, but I just haven't had the capacity to take on. And I thought that since the subcommittee, Jim and Jeanette and me working with the URSA grant has worked so well for us. You know, it just allows us to meet informally, not take minutes and you know, just kind of obviously have to report back to the committee on anything that we do and get approval for anything that, you know, is significant. So we're not just totally on our own, but it just worked so well. And it's just more informal and we can communicate together, email without breaking open meeting laws. So I proposed, I think at the last meeting, having other subcommittees that might take on invasive species that I think I had mentioned also at that meeting that we no longer have a partnership with the Career Center because they discontinued the program that had helped us with invasive species in the past. So I didn't want that momentum that we had started to fade away, and thought a subcommittee might be able to spark that and keep that the progress that we've made moving forward. And then conservation, the second area was conservation, and just looking and constantly seeing what we can do to continue to protect areas. We've made huge strides in hopefully getting the Ford property and also the new parcel from, I forget his name, but who bought it from Ford. So we gained some acreage there, but it's always in our best interest to continue to look at conservation and easements. So it was saying with that said, I've reached out to a few people, and they've stepped forward to kind of present to us what they might think that they would like to do with a subcommittee. So kind of at this point, I think I'll turn it over to you, either Tim or Mark, to discuss what you had in mind with the subcommittees. And I want to thank you guys so much for taking on this initiative. Appreciate it.
Of course. Mark, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, Chris and I had a couple of conversations about creating a subcommittee about conservation and access. And so I kind of looked through the management plan, and it does actually say that that the Cow Pasture Committee would investigate opportunities to conserve existing trails on abutting lands that provide access and provide exceptional recreation, aesthetic, and ecological value. So it would be, supporting the purpose of the cow pasture. And so my idea behind that and with the subcommittee would be to identify, right now we have one access point, one legal access point into the cow pasture that's not, access through abutting lands. But if we were to identify, all the trails and all the paper streets and all the properties that the city owns that abut or are near the cow pasture, and look at ways that we could help integrate those into legal access and have some form of legal protection, either through acquisition or have, like, the city owns a number of lots in the paper streets, to work toward having those protected, as either through, again, acquisition or integration into the cow pasture. And then the trails that are on private lands, which there's a huge network of them actually that access the cow pasture. If we could, hopefully at least get a trail easement of some kind that would give, perpetual protection on that. So even if the properties, if they were to get posted or change ownership, and possibly be developed, if we had at least a trail easement through Perrin Field, primarily is the first thing that comes to mind for me, then at least we would continue to have protected public pedestrian access into the cow pasture. So, and there are many reasons I could go into about, the diversity of wildlife habitat that those like Perrin Field provides, abutting the cow pasture and stuff. But that's again, the management plan does give us guidance to pursue that, and I just think it'd be something of value for the committee to do, and I'm happy to work on that. That's all I got.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mark, you should also mention that you actually have bodies other than yourself.
I do actually. I have two really great people who are interested in participating in this subcommittee. One is this guy, I don't know if anyone knows him. His name is Mike Frazier, and his history with the Forest Parks and Recreation it would be invaluable. And the second individual is a neighbor of mine, Stacy Sibula, who just moved into Barre and from Montpelier. And Stacy is the Conservation Agriculture Director at the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. And she, her job is to manage funds, federal, state funds for conservation of properties. And she's really interested. She loves the cow pasture. She goes up there quite often. And she's really excited to help us in terms of pursuing, if should we decide to, try to either acquire or, easements or properties, she would be fantastic in getting funding for that. So she, like I said, she manages, I think her budget is like $6 million of federal funds and state funds to conserve agricultural lands in the state. So anyway, those are the two folks who I've reached out to, and both have agreed that they would love to help on the committee. And if anyone on the subcommittee, and if anyone on the committee is interested, that would be awesome as well. But
that's excellent.
I think the rules for subcommittees is that you can't have like Jim, Janet, and Jeanette and myself are on that committee, and I think like committee members, because we're a 7-member committee, it can't be over 3, but yeah, you're not having, I don't think that, I think that there could be a minimum of 1. I'm certain, not positive, but I don't think that there's any problem there. But yeah, if anyone else would like to be on that committee, that would be great. But thank you so much again, Mark, for putting that effort. And you should also mention that you wrote up a nice proposal. And at this point in time, I think that in this meeting we should, Tim, maybe make a motion to approve these subcommittees. And I think we have enough members here today. We're just missing Susan, so that I think that we can formally approve these subcommittees like we did with the Ursa Grant subcommittee a few years ago. And then maybe post, Mark, you shared with all of us in an email your proposal.
Don't know. I think I just shared it with you, and didn't, because I didn't know if that was something that that I should have shared. And I never want to hit reply all. So yeah. I just shared that with you, but I'm happy to share it with the committee. I think let me see if do you want me to, I can send that to folks probably now if I can find it. But I'll work on that and get it to you guys if you want.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be now. I think that maybe if you send it to, and I guess we just can't everyone respond to it, but maybe if you send it around to everyone, and it's kind of a public document, so I think I should, because we discussed it, attach it to these minutes. And then maybe next week, vote after everyone has read. You really spent a lot of time kind of documenting, your thoughts, and it's well thought out. And you put in that it's part of like the management plan, mission, or action item. So somehow it's got to, I think, become a public document, and we have to vote on it. And I don't know procedure-wise if we should just wait until the next meeting when we've all had a chance to read that and comment on it, and then vote next meeting. Anyone else have an opinion on that?
Yeah, procedurally, I would suggest getting it to Chris as the note taker right now as the secretary, and then make sure, Mark, that you call it a draft, So that when it gets loaded to the website as part of the meeting minutes for today, it's really clear that it is a draft. And
Okay.
then we read it and approve it, and then the final version would go up next time, you
Okay.
know. So that's how I would handle that procedurally. I have a question for you, Mark, about the project, which is really exciting. But I have another procedural question about inviting, and maybe you already researched this and I missed it. But the procedural question about inviting non-official cow pasture committee meetings to a subcommittee, do they have to be vetted and approved by city council as well, or are they ad hoc, and their ad hocness allows us to kind of invite people to those subcommittees as long as there's a full member or two on the subcommittees? Because we were all, the URSA subcommittee is all comprised of members, full members. So I don't know if we're breaking any rules by inviting, additional people. Does
Yeah,
anybody know this?
I don't know. I just in a conversation with Chris, it was my understanding that it would be okay. But I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
There was an updated document fairly recently of all of the rules for committees and members and everything, and I want to say it addressed subcommittees.
Okay.
In that, I don't know that for a fact, but
yeah.
Yeah, that was a good point, Jeanette.
I think it's on the website.
I don't know why I was assuming that that there are other subcommittees. Maybe I saw minutes or something for other committees, and it could have been Barre Town for all I know, committees. But I will follow up on that. I'm hoping that it's not an issue. I was assuming it wasn't, but it would be unfortunate if that was an issue. But it's certainly moving forward. We certainly should.
Yeah, and I think
answer to that.
If it needs city council approval, I can't see them not approving it. If Mike and Stacy would be willing to just hop in a city council meeting and introduce themselves if they need the vetting, I can't imagine that they would turn down extra help. And I'm really excited about the project. And Mark, you're probably going to address this in your document, so maybe let me know if it is addressed. But is the goal twofold in that obviously you're trying to preserve the access from different access points, but is it also to then make that more visible? Is that also one of the goals, so that if I go up to the corner Winter Meadow and onward, I know that there's an access point and an
right. So
official.
I just emailed the document to everybody, and I've got right now identified I think it's 4 objectives. And so for some reason I can't bring it up on my phone, but let me see if I can get it back up here. Let's see. And education is part of that. So the objectives are to develop a prioritized list of public and private non-motorized corridors, city-owned properties, and access points to the Barre to the cow pasture. And so we're going to, and then develop a tiered mitigation strategy for the public and private lands, like adding city-owned land to the cow pasture, placing trail or conservation easements on private abutting lands, purchasing private abutting lands. Educate the public through signs, social media posts, etc., on the land ownership status and need for access protection, and then identify funding opportunities for land and easement acquisition, and develop an internal process for applying for funding once a project has been identified. So I think that would be like the educate the public on the land ownership status, I guess. But,
yep, that's great.
Yeah.
I love that idea. And I think it's really important, because every time I walk in the pairing land, I worry about, oh, what happens if, the sisters decide to sell it or whatever.
Exactly.
It feels like it's on very shaky ground right now, the access there. So thank you for doing that. And I think, right now I have an interest in this, and I think probably the URSA subcommittee, maybe if ever we get that project sort of underway, then I don't want to volunteer Jim and Chris, but I would assume that the funding sources and the sort of writing grants and all of that, that we could probably participate in that. And I would definitely want to participate in that, especially once the Ursa stuff lightens up a little bit.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
That would be super exciting.
And I would just kind of like to chime in that I think that this is nothing that's going to happen right away. I'm
Right.
constantly in touch with Peggy Hood, you know, on their neighbors. So I always at Christmas time bring them over cookies or a bread or something, and a thank you note to the sisters for sharing their property. But in conversation, I just know they're like their mom, very protective of the land, and you know, it's their inheritance for their kids. So so I think it's like Mark had mentioned, it's just being proactive and just letting them know, you know, I've always told Peggy, you know, please keep us in mind, you know, in regard to the property, because, you know, we would do everything in our power to conserve and protect and make sure that they get the, you know, value that their land is worth after all those years of stewardship. So I've had that conversation with her, you know, it seems like, and her mom prior to Peggy Hood for a long time. And so I don't expect anything, but I think it's just just being proactive. And if an opportunity comes up, we would be ready for it.
It's great.
Sounds good. I can't find that document that I was thinking of. It doesn't seem to be easily available on the city website, so maybe it was in an email, but
I think I've got it. I'll drop it in the chat. I searched it while we were talking about it. It didn't have anything about subcommittees though.
I found one, but it didn't either.
There's
But
the
it
rules
didn't
of
seem as specific.
procedure.
Yeah, that's what I found.
Okay.
I thought there was one that was more specific to like committees.
Oh,
Anyway.
I guess I can't find it either then.
Yeah, sorry to be kind of a party pooper, but I want to make sure that they, you know, that at the end procedurally somebody doesn't poke a hole in it and said, well, you know, it says, well, Mike and Stacy weren't really even supposed to do this work and go away. This is invalid. So yeah, I'd rather kind of make sure it's airtight.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, and then so the other side of that is I wonder, you know, should that it not be valid for them to be members of the subcommittee? I mean, we could still consult them, I would think, you know.
There's no reason to get you know, advice and have advisors to committees.
Right. So and I think they would be, I can't speak for them, but I would think you know, that they would be willing to consider that, I would hope.
Yeah.
And I'd be happy to talk to them about that.
It's great resources. Thank you for getting them
I was going to
interested.
suggest, if on paper it needs to be a committee of one that has advisors.
yeah, sure.
Or it could be a committee of two, and one of them is, you know, doesn't really actively participate. So
no, I want active participation.
That's true.
But yeah, we'll iron out any kinks, you know, once the subcommittee is approved. And
tread lightly. The last time I agreed to do something with Mark, I was dragging a tire behind me on snowshoes.
See, this is easy compared to that.
That's what he says.
He set the bar high so that he could say exactly this, like, oh, this is going to be a light lift.
I'm not dragging any tires anymore, Tim. That was a one and done.
So just I will follow up, and Carol Dawes has been my go-to for procedural type of stuff, and she's been great about, I was actually just in touch with her about must I include it in this draft, or the agenda for this meeting. And she said it'll become a public record. So yes, you have to keep it someplace. So, but I didn't have to include it in today's meeting, but now that I have it, it'll be attached. So I'll reach out to Carol and confirm, hopefully confirm that subcommittee with 2 non-committee members is appropriate.
Thanks.
And I can provide an update on invasive plant control. So I had met with Susan last week. We ended up going for a walk in the cow pasture just to talk about what a subcommittee regarding invasive species, specifically like vegetation, would look like. I know, Mark, you had suggested including animal species as well on an email. That was after we met, but basically our idea was not nearly as structured as Mark's, but I think that's okay. We had 3 kind of ideas in mind of what we wanted to achieve. One was just making sure that the subcommittee was flexible to what, both what needed to be done, but the capacity of the subcommittee members, because there is so much to do with invasive species, from physically caring and maintaining them to educating the public and getting more people involved. And it would be very easy to burn out, I think, even with a committee of 7 people tackling it. So we had said, we want to make sure that we're keeping what our goals and everything are flexible, and we're just kind of reevaluating to see what we can do, if we can improve, or if it wouldn't be worth having a subcommittee at any point. So that was kind of like the baseline we set, and we thought the best way to start this process would just be to set 2 goals for what the subcommittee would set out to accomplish this year. And each of us kind of had one of those. So one of them was to create a guide on information for invasive species. So I had participated in the Forest Hero Network, I don't remember the exact name, series, but it was like an online presentation and activity for people to, they called it a training. It didn't really feel like that, but it was kind of for like how to get engaged with invasive species and how to bring people into the conversation. It was an introduction to some resources that are available online. And so I thought it'd be nice just to have that captured in some form of like document or something that we can all refer to in the future, or other members as well. That way, it's because I think right now it's mostly like me just in my memory of like where to access this stuff. I'm sure other people could find it or have ideas maybe, but the idea would be that anybody could come in and use this document to find some of these resources and then get the information that they needed if we don't already know it. And then the other piece of that was more community outreach. So we normally do on Green Up Day, we normally gather committee members to physically go remove both trash and invasive species. And we usually open it up to the community as well. So from time to time, we have a couple members here and there. Before COVID, I think we had a really good turnout one of those days. So we want to do that again. And the other goal would be to do that twice in the year. So one would be the Green Up Day, and then another one would be in the fall, when some of those invasive species start to change colors and you can get a different visual on them. And Susan had suggested that she could work on coordinating that as well. So we had discussed a couple other ideas that I know have floated around, such as, training community members to be responsible for an area or an invasive species. But we didn't want to set out to do that because that's reliant on community involvement, and we weren't sure exactly how much we were going to get yet. So that's kind of we'll see how it goes, and if we can implement it, great. If not, we'll keep going with the goals that we set. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts on that?
I think that's awesome. I had sent a couple of you an email, and I just want to share this with the group. Danielle is a state lands ecologist and somewhat of a botanist. And she also works pretty closely with the new state botanist and Fish and Wildlife. And she lives, I don't know where she lives, over sort of behind the BOR. So she goes up to cow pasture fairly regularly. And I know both of them have talked about it, and we're pretty excited about that new plot of land that was acquired. That's above the smaller plots. And I guess with the open talus slope there and some of the tree species and some of the plants that they noticed there, they were like, ooh, this is kind of a unique natural community compared to some of the other slopes that are a little more degraded and more cow pasture. They were a cow pasture and kind of got beat up a little bit. And Danielle had mentioned that there's very few invasive species up in that recently acquired plot, but there are some. And she had suggested that maybe prioritizing getting those out of that area, that's sort of an easier goal to be like, oh, there's only a couple of burning bush here, only a couple of this particular plant, getting them out of that area, and then they won't necessarily spread as quickly as where they're already really established. So it's something to just consider. And I think that either Danielle or Grace would probably be willing to work with us, or at least come out on those days and go up in that area and talk about that stuff. So, and I'm also interested, I haven't really talked to Danielle about what's going on up there, but it'd be really cool to do a walk in that area at some point. And Grace had also talked about being willing to lead a walk up there. And she's just a wealth of knowledge as far as botany and natural communities go. So you can kind of build off of that too.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. That's awesome that we're bringing in all these new city people that have, a passion for the place. And I think the only invasive that I have seen up in that area is, and now I can't think of it, Cotoneaster, I think, with the little spines, and they're really easy to pull.
Yeah.
But those are the ones that I have. That's the only invasive that I have that's popped out for me. So I think on a green up day, we could, really take care of all of those. They're just really easy to identify. But yeah, I'd be curious if that was what they were. Oh, it's not Cotoneaster, I'm sorry, it's Barberry with the little thorns.
Yeah, I've seen that up there too.
Yeah, so that would be a really easy grab and a great idea to kind of keep that area clean. So thank you for reaching out to Danielle and kind of grabbing another person to get involved.
We'll see how involved I can get them.
And Tim, I think that's great. I think that a lot of times it's just overwhelming. I know that Mark had mentioned about invasive insects, which are an issue as well, as far as, public education. But I think it's really easy to get overwhelmed. I know that I have on the committee been overwhelmed a lot trying to, keep things juggling. But with just being the two of you, I think that's, I personally think it's a good idea to, kind of keep the mission that you're kind of contained and not overwhelming to you.
We'd also suggested too that in the event there is an outside group that's interested, like the church group a year or two ago that came in, that could also be our responsibility to just coordinate with. That way, as a subcommittee, we don't need to like bog down our meetings with approvals and it takes 2 months or whatever. It would be just something that we could, set up with them on the side and inform everybody at a meeting. So if Chris, I guess if you get contacted again in the future, feel free to forward the discussion to us and we can delegate that. I really like the idea too, Jim, just a second to that idea of, I think it'd be a fun group activity, maybe during Green Up Day, just to go up and walk on the new property that has been acquired, and get some insight on it, remove some invasive species from it. Yeah. It was talking about being overwhelmed, Chris. And to everybody, it was really funny because I was telling Susan on our walk about winged euonymus or burning bush, and it was like perfect timing. Like I was describing it, and as I turned to her to look at her for a moment, there was a huge one like right next to us where we stopped. We were taking that kind of back trail on the hillside there, and yeah, I had to I had to say, I swear I didn't just conjure that by describing it, but it was there and it was frozen, so we couldn't pull it up. But
It seems to
Yeah.
follow you around, Tim, because you hate it so much. It's like, oh, there he is. Pull at the stops.
oh, it was perfect timing. But
Yeah, Mike
Um,
hates to walk up in the pasture with me because we can't just walk. I'm always like, here, let's pull some.
so I don't mind making motions for the subcommittees, but do we want to? I think we could. Let me just think out loud here. I think we could make motions for these subcommittees and then give everybody a chance to review the guidelines that Mark put together, and then we could choose to adopt those next meeting. If that sounds all right. And I think as well, if anybody has feedback on those, on the policy, I don't know what to call it exactly.
Which the draft that Mark put together?
Yeah, the subcommittee draft, I guess. If anybody has any comments, you can just reply to Mark, like without hitting reply all, just with some feedback. And then Mark, you can make the decision whether to incorporate changes or not, and then we vote on a final draft at the final meeting.
Okay.
And Tim, maybe you could just briefly type up something so it could become, public,
Okay.
information. It doesn't have to be anything, just what you described with the two goals and would be great.
Should we make two separate motions because they're two separate subcommittees? Would that be cleaner?
I think so.
Okay, so I would like to make a motion to what do we do with the subcommittee? What's the word? What's the verb I'm looking for?
Create.
To create. Oh my God. Yes. I would like to make a motion to create the subcommittee conservation and access.
I will second that motion. And it's open for discussion now or comments if anybody has any. And hearing none, we can take a vote. Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
don't have anything
Jim.
specific, but we will have to figure out if it's okay with just one person to be leading it, one member of the committee.
Okay, so let me restate my motion. I make a motion to create the conservation and access subcommittee, provided it is allowable to have one full member and two ad hoc community members. So it's conditional, I guess.
I'll second that again. Any other comments? All right. So we do take a vote on that. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and the motion passes.
Okay.
Golf clap.
I'd like to propose a motion to create the invasive plant control subcommittee.
I'll second that.
Any comments or discussion? Okay, we can take a vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And all opposed? Okay, the motion passes. It's fun every so often making motions and doing the whole approval process because it makes you feel more like formal after having a lot of like somewhat informal discussion. Well, that's exciting. Great, we've got 2 new subcommittees. I'm going to move us along on the agenda here. Next is the URSA grant. Are there any updates on that?
Where do we start?
Go ahead,
Grab a
Janet.
sandwich. No, you go ahead. You've done all the heavy lifting for that one.
wasn't been heavy lifting. It's been being obnoxiously
Patient.
persistent.
Patient.
So the final grant was received, I think, on December 20th, I want to say. I might not be correct on that exact date, but it was finally signed and approved. It came with a deadline that was not okay. So we went through the process. It was like, gave us to 6/20/25 to complete, which was going to only be one field season. So we were able to get that extended to 12/25, allowing 2 field seasons. So that had to go through for signature again. And so that was signed off on. And so we have the grant. We finalized, and it was posted today, the request for proposal for the work, the field work on the grant. That took some doing. And this is news to Jeanette and Jim. Janet did hear my voicemail requesting an extension this morning. She had posted it yesterday, the RFP. It can be found on the city's website. And we originally had like a date mid-February or something. That wasn't a lot of time for people to get proposals in. So I did ask for an extension, and Janet said that she can extend it now. She said it would be easy to do. I don't know if I want to ask her to do it now, or she can extend it if we don't get proposals, or if we only get one, extend it at the time, the date that we, February 26th or whatever it was. So Jim, the question is, do you want me to have her extend it now? So that the reason is that there is a trail crew, a professional trail crew that we know of, that we've been letting them know that this project is in the works. But they're not really, they're traveling at this point, so they might need more time. So shall I ask so that we make sure that they have a comfortable amount of time to submit a proposal, to have it extended at this point in time?
I would say yes, just based on what Mariah's response to me was. It sounds like they're out of the country and not getting back until mid-February, and then they'd only have about a week to put that together. And it sounded like she was like, we can do that if we have to, but I don't think it will hurt anything to extend it at this point. It's only been 2 years, so what's another week or two?
So I don't have my calendar in front of me, but so I think that first week of March, I think the Friday, the Friday of the first week in March, I think that date would give them an extra week.
That is March 1st. That Friday.
Okay. Jim, is that okay?
Is that enough of an extension, or do we want to do it March 8th? And honestly, you could also do it on a Monday, because that would give them the full weekend. We're not going to look at it over the weekend, probably.
I'm not sure if I'm March. Oh, that was weird. Was I looking at the wrong calendar? March 1st is a Friday. Okay.
Yeah. So we could even do it Monday, because nobody does anything with these.
Yeah, do it to the 4th.
The 4th, yeah. That would give folks a weekend.
Yeah.
Okay. I should note that it's always been pretty quick every time we've had RFPs out, whether it's for the management plan or the other grants that we'd received to review, and that we really have never had only one proposal to review. But I am going to be leaving March, I believe, 6th. I don't know. I don't have my calendar in front of me as to what date that we're traveling. But I believe we're flying out March 6th. So I just want to make sure that that doesn't leave the 3 of us much time to review the proposals, and I'll be gone for 2.5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also, and I would certainly trust you two to look at the proposals and award somebody if I'm not available. But
How
Well,
much, how much
go ahead, Jim.
turnaround time, how much turnaround time do we usually have from receiving the proposal, from the closing of the proposals to actually accepting someone?
My recollection is in the past, and Mark, you might have been on one of the committee at the time when we were doing proposal, RFPs for something. I forget what it was, a management plan or some other work. But basically, we just at the meeting we reviewed it and had a few questions and just said we accept this, and we passed it on to Janet or whatever I think it was Mike Miller, her predecessor in the planning office, and then they took it from there.
So I think, Jim, your question was more about what's the required turnaround time in the procurement process, right? So what does the city usually do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the deadline happens, and then how long do we have until we have to have a final decision?
Oh, I don't know.
Our next actual cow pasture meeting isn't until the 21st that month.
And I think that because we're a subcommittee, I think that I might be overstepping our boundary here as a subcommittee, but is it the general feeling of the other committee members that you would be agreeable to whatever we decided on as being an appropriate proposal?
Yeah, I am comfortable with that.
I would say so. I think as well, Chris, as chair, you can make those decisions if need be.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Agreed.
So Chris, you could probably, we could already do a first round of checking submissions, the week before, so just to buy you a little bit of time, because we don't expect a ton of them. So we could see what's there, maybe have a quick review meeting to knock the first ones out, and then anything that comes in, maybe we could briefly meet right before you leave, right after the deadline and before you leave, which is pretty much the day before you leave, to review any additional ones that might have come in right by the deadline. That might help you just save some time and not be quite as, crazy getting out the door, if that would work.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so I will ask for a March 4th extension.
And if you all have connections with people who do this kind of work, please send out the link and invite them to please apply. I don't know any people that do that, but I have the feeling that probably Mark, you do, and both Marks, you probably do, and Jim, you definitely do. So
Yeah, Daniela's gonna ask at her office where FPR folks work if they have any recommendations also for good groups to send it to. So
that's
hopefully
great.
we'll get more than one.
Jim, you said Mariah, was that Northwoods? Is that?
No, it's Sinuosity. It's Brooke Scatcherd, Mariah Keehee.
Okay.
I think they did the Montpelier North Branch trails, the bike trails in that area.
Yep.
Is Danielle, is she A&R?
She's A&R. She now works for Fish and Wildlife.
Fish and Wildlife. Okay, because I think I have another one of the other departments in A&R that I could ask their grants person too. I think Parks and Rec.
That's,
I have a grants. Okay, yeah, I have a grants contact there too that I could ask to maybe get some names to forward it to.
Yeah, there's a lot of work going on these days. A lot of trails being built, and I'm sure FPR can recommend people that actually follow that know the FPR guidelines too, which is a part of the grant. So
yeah, okay,
yeah,
good
that'd be
idea.
great.
Yep.
So I should add, I have been looking for the RFP being posted, and it hadn't been posted at that time, but I was looking in the wrong place. I was looking under, oh gosh, I forget what it said. It resides, it's in the public announcements portion of the website, not the bids and proposals. So I kept checking to see if it came up under bids and proposals, was my intuition, but Janet clarified that it's under the public announcement portion of the city website. So that's where everyone can find the, and I'll put that in the meeting minutes.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat also.
Okay. So Jim and Janet, Jeanette, do you have anything else that I haven't spoke of for the Ursa? Oh gosh, the
Property.
The land,
property.
That whole other thing that is.
Yeah, I'll try to not take so long to describe it. So I finally called Marilyn Ford and just frankly told her that I was embarrassed to call her before getting, finally getting the grant, December 20th, and because I had told her at the beginning of May that we had the grant, which we were led to believe. So I let her know that, apologize and that it's going to be a priority, with the assessment and which is needed on the property, and then the purchase and sales agreement, drafting that the city has to do. So she was kind of, basically told me, well, I've waited a long time and, led me to believe that she's not committed to us. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. And I let her know, she had concern that, it was 15,000, but, it's probably worth a lot more than that kind of. And I let her know that, we're required by standards to provide her with the assessed value, the assessment of the property. So the committee is prepared that if she doesn't want, if it appraises, is assessed at a higher value, that, she can request that amount. So, so Jim and Jeanette and I have some ideas where we could pull some money from the grant, other spots, to meet that additional costs. So, so that's in the work. Janet thought that it was going to be done, the assessment, last Friday. And when I reached out to her, like on Tuesday or Wednesday, it hadn't been completed yet. So hopefully we'll get some news on that soon, and that we'll know where we are with the grant and, be able to, hopefully shuffle some money if it is assessed at a higher value. She can, Marilyn, have a tax deduction and a donation for the difference between, what we put in for, but I don't blame her for not wanting to do that. She's been paying taxes on the property she's held it for us for the last 3 years. So I would totally understand if she and her family, want the full assessed value of it. She did also mention that she was planning on putting it on the market, not in the winter, but this spring. So they had already moved on from us. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. And Janet is also said that she would be in contact with the city attorney for getting the purchase and sales agreement going. So that's all that I have on that. So keeping my fingers crossed. I'm kind of concerned because that really, the grant focus, I think, was protecting trail, trail parking, trail access. So it's kind of like the big thing I think that we received the grant for was in that purchase of the land. So I don't think they would take it away from us, but it would be unfortunate that if that didn't happen, we weren't allowed to purchase that property.
Thanks for all your work on that.
Yeah, especially Chris, who just was tirelessly pursuing every possible angle on this thing, and just constantly, being in touch with the city and moving that along. And it was really, if you remember, it was because of an infraction with the wastewater or something that held up everything. So that's really unfortunate that it happens that way when the city, and it happens all the time when the city isn't compliant in one area, that the rest of everything suffers. So yeah, so thank you, Chris, for staying on top of that. That was like a full-time job for a while.
The one other thing I might add is I was in touch with Brian Baker today, and I'd been in touch with Bill Ahern, the previous not public works engineer, city engineer, regarding an assessment that Bill Ahern had done on the cost of developing a road down to those lots. And it was quite significant because they have to build a standard size road, whether it's 40 feet or whatever it is, and then they had to be responsible for the sewer and the water out to the house as well. So it was a significant amount of money, and I've been trying to get a hold of that piece of information, that assessment that Bill had done, and he was going to go down to City Hall and meet with Brian, and he never did. So for whatever reason, so I wanted the assessor to have that piece of information because it would really help with a fair assessment of that property. It's not like the other lots at Maplewood Avenue where the water and sewer is right there at the curb. It would be a significant cost to develop those properties. So Brian, as I have been kind of miscommunicating with Janet, she wasn't quite understanding. So I spoke with him this morning, and he has an understanding of what Bill had done, and he said if need be he could probably rough something up. I think Bill Ahern is traveling, and he ended up not being able to get down to City Hall, I think, and meet with Brian, but so that's kind of in the works too. He's aware of the importance of that piece of information, getting that information to the assessor.
I know Susan and I had a general question too about, I think there were parts of the URSA grant that affected like inclusion potentially, and maybe invasive species to that matter, but I wasn't sure if you could provide a quick reminder on that.
Janet,
Or
you did the inclusion part on that, and you did a really good job on the grant application on the inclusion. Maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, that was more, I think, in the realm of communications and outreach. So,
for like events that
in
we're
your
gonna do.
subcommittee's area. Well, more really promoting the park as a close and accessible place that is for everybody, and making it I think there is an educational component there, and definitely a communications component, just to make sure that people who may not see it as a natural go-to to recreate would see it as an option and as a safe option. So there's definitely that component that would affect what your subcommittee is doing once we get to, and the signage as well, to make sure that signals also welcoming space. And then I think at some point we may have even said we're going to add signage downtown, if I remember right, to make sure people know about it, right? Because you're like, okay, how do I find this place? It's even, you don't even know how to get there because you have to go 8 different turns to find the right road to get up. So I think it was really more the communications piece. I don't know that we had a strong ADA accessibility component in there that was called out. It was more for EDI, that aspect of it. And I would hope that the bridge is going to be, clearly should be accessible, but then you can't get to the bridge, right? Like
Mhm.
if you're in a wheelchair, for instance, that's a whole different thing that we did not
No.
build accessibility into that. That probably would have increased our ask by at least 50 grand or something. So it's more DEI related.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
You probably could pitch the trail from the parking lot to the stream crossing as accessible. I don't know if there's anything that would need to be done to actually qualify that, but
It would be related to the grade, so it depends on how steep that hill is, and it's a pretty steep hill, so there'd have to be a
Yeah.
ton of switchbacks to keep it at that
Okay.
lower grade.
Right. And a certain width, right? And
Yeah.
surface.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That-
I
that
don't know that.
wasn't-
okay.
Yeah.
That's not what we put forward.
No.
But that's an interesting, I'm glad you brought that up because it never in actually the actual grant, it didn't like we put a lot of information that was in the application that really doesn't come forth and it was easy to forget our you know what we had said that we were going to do.
Yeah.
So we'll have to make sure that we pull out our application that really speaks to that. So I'm glad you brought that up, Tim.
Yeah, it's a good point because it's not a requirement in the end for the grant reporting, I don't think, but we also committed as this group to the city's DI plan, whatever it has a specific name and I forget it right now, but we as a group committed to doing that work and we took elements from that plan and use those as a foundation to write those parts in the grant that ask specifically about inclusion. So it all kind of ties together in that work.
And I should note that Mark had mentioned, Martin, you know, when it comes time to creating signs, and, you know, that was a big component of the grant, the wayfinding signs that we might bring in the community somehow in, you know, naming the signs or naming the place and, you know, that could check off that box, I think, as, you know, reaching out to people that normally wouldn't be in the pasture or, you know, so I thought that was a good idea.
Glad to see that it's rolling again.
Finally.
It was a little worrisome there for a little bit, but
It
especially
still
after all
is,
the work
but
you guys
yeah.
put in.
If we can get that property wrapped up, I think the trail stuff is fairly straightforward. We have 2
Yeah.
years to do that. We have one group that's interested in and probably can at least get a couple other proposals, I'm hoping. So it's really just acquiring that property is the next big step.
Is it like an all or nothing thing? Like if you can't get the property, does that cancel the rest of it or just parts of it? Okay, good.
I don't even know. You know, we were hyper focused on preserving the property because of where the parking lot is currently. I mean, it's nice to add property anyway, like to add land, but it was really to preserve that parking lot. And I don't know, maybe there are alternatives if we really lost it. There might be alternatives to go further into where the boulders are and the sign, the kiosk, to move parking into there, which would be kind of tragic, but better than nothing, right? Better than losing access to parking altogether.
Well,
so, and we hadn't even talked about that because it wasn't,
That's
not something we really want to consider.
Right.
Not yet.
No.
Next
but I think
people also just park on the side of the road too. I don't see, you know, I foresee that just being the normal if that were to happen. You just have a bunch of people parking on the side of the road.
what the combination now is, and Bill in his assessment, he said that the street has to be so wide, and I thought he told me that there would be 3 parking spaces on the road if it was developed. And I don't know how they would turn around other than in the driveway of the person that would build back there. But I think the other key component is that I think it's a really unique habitat. There's some really unique wildflowers, hepatica, and a few other ones that I don't know what they are, spring ephemerals along that trail coming up. So it would really, if that area was built, it would really cut into a beautiful, that beautiful paper street coming up. And I don't know how close that they could build to that paper street, but I think that's, and Jeanette, I still want to bring you down that street because it really is a special passageway. So yeah, it's a combination of trailhead preservation because the grant was for not buying more land. It was for dealing with your existing land. And the only reason we could get that property purchased was because it had a component on it for trailhead, preservation.
Yeah. And I think we just have to be creative about if it were to fall through, which it won't. We have to be creative about the money and how we could probably use it. They seem really flexible in the state in terms of how you can use the individual line items that we put in the budget. And, we already talked about how we can probably move things around. And I think we could do that further as well. They didn't seem to be too strict about it because I don't think it's federal money at all. So they have a fair amount of flexibility in the state.
That's good. Thank you again for all that work. I am gonna move us along in our agenda here. So this last spot is just a bunch of smaller items that we reserve as updates, usually just things that we end up postponing. So I'm just going to open that up to ask if anybody has any updates on any of those items.
I did, I added one thing. I sent out a draft agenda and then I added another item to the agenda. And it was the committee Gmail account. So I added that. I don't know. It might not be on the draft that I had sent to you because I had spaced it out. But if it's okay, it's on the official one that was posted. I'd like to just kind of ask. I never checked the Gmail account. I was never able to get there. And I just don't know if other people are looking at it. I'm a little concerned that that's our contact. And I'm just wondering, I think, Jeanette, you were the only one that was checking it. And I don't want that to be a burden to you, but who else has access and is checking our Gmail account?
So I've been checking it and there's really no traffic aside from the occasional junk. And I think, Tim, you actually had access once to the document side there, but I don't think you checked the emails, right?
I hadn't been checking emails. I had a bunch of documents that I moved over to Google Drive for storage.
Drive, yeah.
And I'm actually glad Chris brought this up because I had tried to log into that. It was probably a few months ago now. And I had the password and then it would make me do some like funny verification thing, like, select the photos that have stoplights on it or whatever. And then it would just bump me back to putting in the password. There was no indication that I was getting the password wrong, but it would make, and it would do that more or less indefinitely. So I didn't know what that was about, if it was rejecting me from accessing it or.
Because the last time we did it, we had to do the double authentication, right? And you texted me and you're like, hey, what's the code?
Yeah.
And I turned that off, I think. So it's single authentication. And I appreciate your concern, Chris, for the time. And I check it about once a week or so, which is probably not super proactive. I don't know if there's an alternative. I mean, aside from us all having individual emails, which we kind of don't want out on the web, right? That was why we did this. I don't have a problem checking it. Just somebody else should also have sort of reliable access to it, just in case I win the lottery and move to New Zealand or something.
I am so not tech savvy, you know, I think that I tried and I couldn't get in, but it was, I wasn't coordinating with you, Jeanette. And I think if, I don't know if all of our emails addresses have to, I think that we all had to have access to it, but at this current time, you know, I think you're really the only one. I was going to throw out, you know, I guess I just never really bothered me to have my Gmail account out there. But I don't even think that that's an option. I think it was, you know, all member, you know, it had to be something accessible to every member. So I think we're a little bit in violation of the intent of those, that contact information. And it was a great thought, a great workaround to have a Gmail account, but I think that we're, I think that we all need to have access to it, or not, I don't know. If it's easier, I honestly don't mind just having my personal Gmail account out there, because I think our committee is unlike other committees that might be more, you know, getting more traffic and issues and concerns. I think that we're a pretty easygoing committee and don't get the issues associated with other committees from
Chris,
the public.
couldn't you just create an email account specifically for you for that purpose of just
That's, I don't want, like, I don't want another email account,
Okay.
you know, and I could, but that's kind of what the cow pasture, that's what we did. But yeah, I don't mind my email address being out there, because honestly, I was just afraid I wouldn't get to it as quickly, you know, if somebody had an urgent need for, you know, our attention. And I think that, I don't know, Jeanette, are you willing to just continue checking it once a week?
Yeah, I can do that. And I think honestly, if somebody has an urgent need to get our attention, they'll probably call the city if it's that urgent, because, you know, I probably wouldn't email a sort of a generic email account if I had something that ensued up there or whatever, dogs or whatever the urgent needs are that people have. So I'm happy to keep checking it. Maybe I can share the password again with you, Tim, just so you have it.
I was just trying to log in now and I can't remember the password apparently.
Okay.
So
Oh,
is it a
You'll get
plus sign or a T?
You'll get a random text from me.
Okay. I was gonna say I don't know exactly what the legal requirement, I guess if it's legal, is, but I would say as long as someone has access to it and is checking it, I know that puts more on Jeanette, but and can inform other people if there was like an email that was directed towards them, that would be okay. How that person responds, I guess, may differ, but you know, you could potentially forward it to someone's personal email and then they could respond.
Right, because at that point your email would be known, but I think that's probably still better than just having it out there. At least for some members were not comfortable with having their email out there. So I think that would solve that. Or, you know, if you don't want your email out there, just pick up the phone and call people if there's an issue. So yeah, I'm happy to keep watching it. And if I, you know, if it gets too much of a burden, there's really no, I just go in there and clean out the junk every now and then. There's I think one person has written a while ago about maybe membership or something on the committee. So no big deal. Happy to do it.
thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. But I've been feeling badly about not following up on that and
No, don't.
not having access.
I think we're more than even on the work. Not even. That's, yeah, it's a pretty low lift. So
does anybody else have any questions or updates on any of the other update bullet points here?
Yeah, and I have to move because UPS just showed up and my dogs are going nuts. I would like to, as the owner of the, or the originator of the t-shirt agenda item, I would like to make a motion to maybe take it off the constant agenda until we can revisit it again sometime.
Okay, I'll second that. And I'm not gonna go in discussion on this. I'm pretty sure there's certain things that you don't need to have discussions and do votes on. So we'll just move that forward at this point. I think it counts as a postponement or something indefinitely.
Tabling, I think, yeah. Oh, so my motion was, I propose a motion to table that item permanently. Guess that's an oxymoron, right?
And I'll second it. So it's okay.
Thanks.
All right. Hearing no other questions or concerns, then I will open it. We're getting near our time here, but we do have a few more minutes. I'll open it up to any other questions or comments anyone would like to make before we adjourn.
I do have an update on the Johnson Street license agreement, and maybe that shouldn't be kind of on this. I think that it's kind of, it'll be kicked into the subcommittee with Mark access. So I think that should not kind of be kind of on this update. So I also make a motion to move that off of the update list because it'll be addressed by the subcommittee.
I second that motion.
Sounds good. Yeah, I kind of saw that as like a catch-all place anyway. So just things that we wanted to note and come back to at some point, but you know, maybe we didn't have a lot to say on it at the time. So
yeah. So the update on and I don't know if you know this, Mark, if I shared this with you, but probably not, because I called Carol Dawes to ask about meeting protocol and a couple of other things, but one of them was the paper street, and she said that they have not been, there's been no new 10-year lease agreement, which is, I think it had, the current owners are probably totally unaware of this, and so there has been no action for them coming in. They haven't been, and I think the longer it goes kind of under the radar screen, the more, you know, if the committee decides that, you know, this is city land and we want an access point here, you know, and it's been, you know, 2 years after the 10-year agreement and they haven't paid their whatever modest amount it was. I think it was $600 for a 10-year lease on that property. Yeah, so there's no updates, Carol said on that they haven't been in, and the city hasn't reached out to them to renew the lease,
Okay.
which I think is a good thing.
All right. Thanks. Thank you.
Any last comments, questions? All right. I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 6:57.
Thank you. Good job keeping us on time.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
I know. Do you remember when